Is that her?
Speaker?
Hello?
Hello.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
How you doing? Put her on.
This is Marium Moore, Kevin's show.
Yeah, this is Kevin.
Oh,
Hi.
hi. Hi, Kevin. Do you want to call me back or?
No, just,
We're ready.
It's time. Just about.
Okay, that's okay. You can put me on hold.
No, we're going to keep you right up. Okay, so you don't want to... Why don't we just go on with this music, okay?
That's fine.
We'll start this, okay.
I'll see if I can find something appropriate for you to close with.
All right.
And I'll write it down and pass it to you.
Okay, then whenever you're ready, just lower it down and come on with your mic here. All right? This is your guest is up.
Well, I
Ready
might
to
as
go?
well just
Okay.
start now.
Lower it down. Come on.
Start out with lower, carefully. Volume's up on the phone. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Kevin Storm Show. Today I have Marium Moore again. For anyone who missed part 1, we were late, so we are having her again, and today she wants to explain a little bit about how she became vegan. So, Marium, if you want to just go ahead and tell your story.
Oh, sure, Kevin. It's great to be back. Thank you for inviting me. It was quite fascinating how I became vegetarian and then vegan. I had never intended to be such, but I had an enlarged liver, and when the doctor gave me advice on how to get well, he told me that I could only have, believe it or not, ripe bananas, and rice, not even brown rice. But he said I needed to put the least amount of stress on my liver as possible, and I had to have complete bed rest for 6 months. And during that time, at the end of my convalescence, I saw an article about the Hunza people. They live in Central Asia, the Hunzas of Central Asia, and they lived to be very old, and they, past 100, and women were still able to have children in their 80s, and men in their 90s. They were still having children, and they were very healthy. They lived up there near the Himalayan mountain tops. So I was very fascinated with this. Being sick, I had decided I don't ever want to get sick again. And if I could get well without eating meat, why did I need meat when I was well? So that was the beginning of my journey. And I was quite shocked 2 years later to learn that the Seventh-day Adventists since the late 1860s were practicing and were advocating a vegetarian and even vegan lifestyle. That's where I became exposed to the vegan lifestyle. And I have to say that I have been blessed. I've been following this diet now for over 40 years, and I'm very blessed.
Thanks for that. How would you
Should I date?
your mic is on,
Yeah, I know, but I'm trying to help
Okay,
you.
what is your favorite source of protein?
What is my favorite what?
Source of protein.
Oh, I have a variety. I have nuts, I have the legumes, and grains. And actually protein is in everything, but I eat the nuts, the walnuts and almonds. Any nut is good, and, the legumes, all your beans, all the different varieties of beans that you have. There's so many.
Hi, Marium. It's
And you
Susan.
eat beans with a whole grain, and you have plenty of protein. I haven't lost my strength in all these years that I've been vegan.
Good morning, Marium. It's Susan.
Oh, hi, Susan.
Hi, how are you? A lot of people don't know very much about nutrition
Pardon?
most people don't know much about nutrition until they start to actually do some research on their own and find out, what their body functions well on, and we don't need that much protein. So, yeah,
Correct.
a small handful of nuts or beans, legumes, stuff like that, and there's a lot of protein in grains and things like that. But a lot of people don't even think that way. They're only concerned with what tastes good or what's traditional in their family, or what's acceptable through their religious preference, whether it's kosher or anything like that. So we had talked a lot on the way here about different things that were acceptable in different types of churches. I didn't realize until the other day there were so many different denominations of churches, but I don't know any other besides Seventh-day Adventists and some Unitarian Universalists that don't use animal products. So I'm really glad that you're able to come on and talk about that, because I think it's really important that people know, that there is a religious basis for, not consuming meat, not harming yourself, not harming others.
In biblical times, or how it's described in the Bible, what was the general treatment of animals?
Well, in the very beginning, in the Garden of Eden, animals were friends. Man and animals were friends. Animals ate a plant-based diet too. You'd have to. This show is too short to go into their digestive system and their molars and all of that, but they weren't really made to be carnivorous themselves. And neither man, although man has a digestive system that is dual. But it was very interesting that they were all friends. It wasn't until after the flood that animals ran away from men, because then men were given the opportunity and even the instruction that they could kill animals for food. There wasn't that much food around. And also I think God was very upset with men, because he said before the flood their thinking was evil continually. These are the men that really were not following God's principles, the men and women not following God's principles. And he knew that eating a lot of meat, because there's a tremendous amount of protein in meat, it would reduce the lifespan, the lifespan of an individual. So too much meat eating does do that. Now, we're happy to get to 67. Some get to 80 and 90, but it's so that's our lifespan. And also, quality of life needs to be considered. How are you still vigorous when you're at 80? Are you still able to go hiking, and enjoy an active life and have an active mind? These are things to consider.
The golden rule is to treat others as you wish to be treated by them. Why is it that seems to not apply to animals?
Well, Jesus was speaking to humans when he spoke about that. He really wasn't speaking about animals. But there are things that God hates, and he does want us to be good stewards of the earth, and certainly, as I have learned recently, that if we were really good stewards of the earth, we would all be having a plant-based diet. Each individual has to make up their own mind. God has given free choice to every person. It's a philosophy. But if everyone were eating a plant-based diet, do you realize there would be no hunger on the earth anywhere? That's an alarming and amazing statistic. So I think people should think about this. Even if they were to cut down to one meal of meat a week or two, it would certainly drastically reduce the amount of land space devoted to animals, and I don't think you would have the same inhumane treatment, those slaughterhouses and the way the animals are raised, it is cruel.
Okay, what was the stance on hoarding animals in biblical times?
Well, they had, first of all, biblical times takes a long span. I don't know what they did prior to the flood. I know that you had, after the flood, you had Abraham, you had Isaac, you had Jacob, and Jacob's generation went to Egypt. We know that the Egyptians had cows, that they were sacred. They considered them sacred. They didn't kill them. The Israelites came with their animals, and they were put in the land of Goshen, which roots were. They were out of the way of the Egyptians because they had their sacrifices, which God had instituted. Because without the shedding of blood, there's no remission of sin. God was trying to teach people that sin is horrible. And when we see blood come from an animal or a person, it's horrible, but it wasn't individual. It wasn't human sacrifice that God did. He used an animal. That was what he used. It was a horrible thing, but sin is horrible. You know, it separates us from God. God made us to dwell with him, to talk with him.
How do we get so far away from what?
Ask her what she was saying. How did we get so far away from that living, like not wanting to do harm to others?
Well, I think it started with Cain in the Garden of Eden. You know, he was angry that God did not accept his sacrifice because it wasn't the sacrifice God had instituted, which was the killing of an animal, because without the shedding of blood, there's no remission of sin. Jesus himself was, all those sacrifices before the cross were pointing to the blood of Jesus that would be shed for mankind once. And because his was such a more costly sacrifice. So Cain is the one who first started murder. He murdered his own brother. So that's where people started getting any evil imagination they had, they did all that before the flood. And in chapter 6 of Genesis, God speaks about it, that man's imagination was only evil continually, except for Noah and his family, who had found grace in his sight. So, and Noah's father died before the flood. Other people died that helped him build the ark. But it's sin. It's sin that causes men to be so inhumane and hurtful toward other people.
What was the punishment for violence towards those who couldn't defend themselves?
I don't know what you're really asking, because Cain's punishment was that he had a mark on his head and he was a vagabond. He was sent out from the presence of God. That was the first person who murdered. People who can't, in the Israel camp, when they were 40 years in the wilderness, and then when they settled in their new cities, if somebody was innocently killed and there was an investigation made, there were also cities of refuge where people who did murder could go, and they could, if they were in that city, they were safe, but if they went out, they were not safe. But their cases were investigated, and in some cases, when they saw that they had wrongly hurt somebody, their life was required. But those are rules toward man. There were really no rules toward animals except to use our good sense, that we should really think about what we do with animals. But animals really are not covered in the Bible. God is interested in rescuing man. He has animals in heaven, but he's interested in restoring man. It wasn't animals that sinned, it was man that sinned.
So the punishment would match the crime?
I don't know if I would make such a general statement, but, because you have to read the rules. They had rules, they had cities where they were where they could go and it was called the City of Refuge. So, but there was an investigation made, and in many cases, the crime of killing is never vindicated. There's many innocent people throughout history that have died, and they're punished. The people who've killed them have never suffered what they did to other people. But their punishment will come when God, he says, vengeance belongs to God, and he will repay. So people throughout the ages, and Christians and people who believe in God, they know God judges fairly, and he will repay, and there will be a punishment to meet whatever crime has been done.
So
it'll be meted out by God Himself. You know, He knows people's hearts. He knows everything that has ever happened.
well, I mean, as far as what's in people's hearts, I mean, as far as the intent, I mean, there are some people that are just blatantly cruel just for the sheer purpose of being cruel. But then there's others who don't even realize what they're doing until it's too late. You know, so I mean, if there's no specific direction biblically to tell people to, you know, be kind to animals and to not treat them like they're inanimate objects or like they're just a product of consumption, like if there's nothing specific for instruction, then how can people find out about, you know, the different cruelty? I mean, I'm still just learning about palm oil and how it harms orangutans, you know, so if there's nowhere people can go other than the internet to actually get some specific instruction, you know, then how do they find out?
Well, we have a lot of instruction given to us in the Bible. It doesn't mention specifically animals, and God has allowed man to eat animals. It's not a crime to eat animals. Where it does become cruel is the way modern society has greatly increased the way animals are raised. You know, they're raised on farms as if they were corn, and then they're brought to their slaughterhouses where it's inhumane treatment of animals. And you know, in the olden days, everyone used to go out and hunt for their own food, and you only got what you needed, you know. So it's a completely different lifestyle. But there's a philosophy behind what we eat, and that's what I think people should pay attention to. They should pay great attention as to what their philosophy of life is. And so I think we should really even think more about reducing the amount of animals people eat, you know. But that's me as a vegetarian and a vegan speaking. I have found the vegan diet has far more variety than the animal diet, and it's so far more nutritious, and you just are happier as a person. You don't need meat to be happy.
What are some things that people can do to stop cruelty in their church?
You know, the ordinary person doesn't have much to do. If you're going to go on rallies, you're going to write articles, you make your personal decision, and right now, so many more people have been making the decision to become vegetarians than they used to. It's an incredible amount of people that have been changing, which is good. So what else can you do? You can support humane treatment of animals, but you have to also give people their choice. God always gives people their choice. He does not force anyone to do anything. You have to come. He says, "Come, let us reason together." So if you have forums such as you have on this show where people can call and talk over the issues, it's a very good way of having people think more deeply about what they're doing and what they would like to see happen to the planet. And it certainly would be wonderful if everyone on the planet had enough to eat.
So you have access to quite a congregation. What do you do to minister to people who just aren't there yet as far as the responsibility of taking care of themselves better?
Well, we run in our congregation, we have vegetarian cooking schools, vegan cooking schools on a monthly basis. And we highly encourage people to become vegetarian and vegan. And you can't force anyone to do anything, but you can highly encourage. and they can see for themselves that people that are vegan and vegetarian are very vigorous. It takes a while for the ravages of meat eating to attack you. So there are are so many antibiotics, there are so many, the excess protein, the weight gain that people get, and then the way they age, the way their memory gets affected, and the sicknesses that they develop can all be traced, to too much protein and, not adequate roughage in your system that you get from plant-based foods. So we do this. I've been on a veggie parade. In fact, there's a lady in Holland who is on it's called Meet the Truth. MEAT, the truth. So meet the truth about meat. And that was a very big wake-up call when I saw that, her DVD, and I was in the parade, so I saw the movie that was made. I could even send you a copy of it. I have more than one copy. I'd be glad to do that.
Well, that'd be nice.
It's quite an eye-opener.
That'd be nice. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I know there's a lot of people who may become aware of the animal cruelty, and they want to help and they want to stop, but then they go to church and, their church is still doing the whole animal sacrifice thing and serving meals, with, like how we say, bloody corpses on the table. If they're not comfortable with that, then they need to find another place to worship, because one person is not going to change a congregation of 100 people, 200 people by themselves, and if they feel, that they can't function there properly, like the way they feel good about it, then if they want to go somewhere else, then they should seek out a Seventh-day Adventist church. Or, like I said, there's Unitarian Universalist churches. Some of them have gone vegetarian and vegan, and there's a couple of them in New Jersey that do monthly potlucks, and I think that's a more productive environment, a more healthy, peaceful environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a growing process. It's a spreading of information. There is so much, like before the 1960s, the Seventh-day Adventist vegan diet was ridiculed. In the 70s and 80s, the 1970s and 80s, it was tolerated. I became vegan in 1970. In the 1990s, it was accepted, and now in the 2000s, it's acclaimed. So there's getting to be more and more interest and support for the vegan way of eating. So I think people continuously talking and, just living out the principles. And, each person has quite a sphere of influence if they would talk about what they have found to be a better way. It does have influence on people. And then there are forums that you can join, Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi.
I heard a screech. I didn't know.
Oh, not from
okay.
here.
So, and there's certainly different, I guess, the forums, the different newspaper articles, magazine articles. People can get busy and do what, do work that way. I think the meat industry is already seeing a cutback in people eating meat.
What is the term?
And you know what? There's another thing that I just remembered. They have talking about the free-ranging chickens, so that they're not in coops, and they eat organic foods. They also have animals that are eating organically, and they're, as they call, free-ranging animals. So they're trying. The meat industry is trying to do this. Some people have gotten the point. But I think there's more that needs to be done, really, because in the Midwest and in the West, water is an issue, and water is a very precious commodity. And animals take up they use a tremendous amount of water. And we're going to have to think about conserving water.
Ask me a question.
Precious. It's very precious.
Ask me a question. What does the term the Lamb of God mean?
The Lamb of God? That is referring to Jesus Christ.
People eat lamb on Easter.
He was the Lamb that was slain from before the foundation of the earth. When man sinned, God already had a plan in place that would keep man from dying right then and there on the spot, because God's law had been violated, and God made a way for man to be reconnected to God, to be reconciled to God, to be able to be with God. And this is God's plan. And then in the fullness of time, Jesus Christ came and he lived the life. He showed us how to be a wonderful, caring, loving person. And he gave us principles to follow. And then he was slain on the cross, but he died the death of every man. It was a one-time thing, and he is the Lamb of God. That was his character was like a lamb. He was meek and lowly and humble.
Then why do people eat lamb on Easter? What's the story behind that?
On Easter?
They did.
Why do they eat any animal at any time? You know, I don't know. I don't know why, but I know that in the ancient Hebrew economy, they did eat lamb. As a matter of fact, when they left Egypt, they had to kill the lamb. That was the sacrificial lamb, and they had to put the blood on the side and on the top of the lintel, it's called, of their house. The angel of death passed over the land, and the firstborn, who in every household that didn't have blood on their doorposts and the lintel, the firstborn in those households died, including Pharaoh's. God was showing people that without the shedding of blood, there's no remission of sins, there's no safety. And Jesus died for us. That's why we can look forward to to being with him forever. When he comes the second time, he's coming to rescue everybody from earth, those that have died, those that are still alive, and take him to heaven, where they will be for 1,000 years, and Jesus will come back a third time where he'll make an end of sin completely. That's another story for another day.
Well, thanks for coming on the show again, and we really appreciated having you on. It was a very
Thank you. I appreciated your invitation, and I will send you the DVD.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Okay, I did not do a very good job of coming up with announcements, but I do have, there's an all-day boycott today. I guess it would have been nice to know this earlier. Ask your local Starbucks to stop using palm oil in its food and have more vegan options on the menu. I mentioned earlier there was something about palm oil. The production of palm oil does harm orangutans. So you can look up some more information on that. There's also the boycott for the city pups in New York. There's protest and puppy mill awareness protest at 1 o'clock today in New York at City Pups. And you can, let's see, I got that notice from Mikey Earthlings Feldman. So if you're on Facebook, you can look them up for more information. You can find the Kevin Storm Show on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and Google, and there's actually a new official website is thekevinstormshow.com. So if you look on there, there's plenty of updates, and there's a fan page on Facebook also.
Well, for my co-host Susan, this is Kevin Storm signing off.
That sounds so funny.
Playing this song for you.
Yeah, I know.
Woolly sheep say brr, brr. Kitty cat say meow. Little duck say quack, quack, quack. Puppy say ruff, ruff. Monkey say
Good morning.
birdie say chip, chip. Donkey say hee-haw, hee-haw. Chicky